Hey, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining our Inside Sharing program. Today, our speaker is Sam, and he's a friend of a guest speaker who joined our program earlier, Bill Williams. And Sam, thank you so much for spending your morning there and joining our Inside Sharing program and sharing your story of life. So we really appreciate your time. Okay.
Thank you, Ha. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I always want to reserve the spotlight to our speaker, so it's best if you can introduce who you are, the work that you do for us in audience. Can you help us doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Sam Kabert. As you mentioned, I have a podcast called Soul Seeker. I recently published my fourth book. It became a number one bestseller. It's called Soul Life Balance,
Mm,
and the subtitle is A Guide to Igniting and Integrating Spiritual Awakenings. And I've spent since college, so the past 12 years or so, in entrepreneurship and building out my business. From there, I started a media company, got into content creation, so many different things, was named to Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 list at just age 31. And through achieving all these goals and, running $1 million company with no employees, just freelancers and working less than 4 hours a day, like I had really achieved the lifestyle I was chasing and just chasing goal after goal, only to be left feeling more empty. And
mm,
eventually, after through a numbing depression, I ended up sitting with a plant medicine known as ayahuasca. Through sitting with the medicine, I had a massive spiritual awakening, and then I went down the spiritual path with blinders on it. And I'm talking about my relationships, the content I was consuming, and just an inward journey for almost 3 years. And now, after really going down that deep, deep path, I'm at that like 12th step of the hero's journey, the model that Joseph Campbell talks about. And now it's really bringing what I've learned back into business and applying how can we bridge the gap between spirituality and business.
wow. Sam, I have a friend who's next door to my home in my hometown. Vivian know about him also. He has a PhD in electrical engineering in a very big university, top university in the US, I believe. And then he went home, and then he's not happy at the works that he did. Even he teach at the university in here, and then he decided to uh, pursue uh, into his spiritual path that no one expecting it to happen, but he happily doing the works that he do at the moment. So your story resonate a lot to me and Vivian, and I think a lot of us are pursuing what we trying to aim in at every day is being happy. And you mentioned that
Mhm.
on when you were very successful running your own business, solo business, right, doing it everything by your own self, and then you felt empty. What happened back then, though?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ha. And part of it was I wrote 3 books in a year, and
Mm,
that's just wild, right? And they weren't like the type of books that I was really putting out there to build a brand and do all the marketing and that type of stuff. Like I pretty much wrote the books because they want to be birthed.
mm,
And I wasn't familiar even with that type of language, like something wanting it to be birthed inside of you. But I was just following my intuition and just writing. I had several podcasts. Like I mentioned, I had the media company as
mm,
well as the business on the board of a couple nonprofits. And I was also in a relationship, a very toxic relationship. We were one of those on and off again type of relationships for about 4 years. So when that relationship came to a head and it finally was like off, and we were both almost caught in this game of like breaking up, getting back together. And then through that kind of sent me on this numbing depression where, I wasn't sleeping and for about a month. I wasn't eating, and I would wake up early because I wasn't really sleeping. I'd get a few hours and I would have energy, and not in energy in terms of like enthusiasm, but just this like alertness that I've only felt like a couple other times when I went through similar numbing depressions earlier in my life. And through following the whispers, I found myself in the ayahuasca ceremony, and during really sitting with this medicine that is known to be like 12 years of therapy packed into one single night. That's what they say about ayahuasca. Through sitting with the medicine, I really was able to realize that it was never so much like I was depressed depressed about like the breakup in their relationship, but that was the catalyst that needed to happen so that I could go within and really do this inner check. And through doing that, I really started to realize how addicted I've been to the dopamine hit of reaching and succeeding and achieving goals. And that was part of the reason why I would set these goals. And, you know, one could say I could have set loftier goals and bigger goals. And at the same time, I'm a big believer in Tim Ferriss's model, the author of 4 Hour Work Week. He calls it the NR, the new rich. And it's basically building a lifestyle business, building a business that fits the lifestyle you want to live. And part of it too is I was living in Silicon Valley and it wasn't feeding my soul. Like, you know, all the things that I used to do, my interests and hobbies and all that type of stuff, I no longer did those because I had blinders on building my business and I kind of disconnected from everything else. And having so much free time in a place like Silicon Valley, it's great. Silicon Valley is great. Everything. Well, to do there in terms of like nature, you know, I really love the ocean and that's a little bit away. There's just different things. I would have like a routine of going to the gym or going on like the creek trail near my house, things like that. But it wasn't really the lifestyle I wanted to live, even though I had built this business that afforded me that lifestyle. So I needed to make massive shifts. And one of those was moving about 45 minutes away, an hour away to the ocean. Now I live about 45 seconds away from the ocean in a town called Santa Cruz and, you know, live beach life and everything else amongst a lot of other major changes, obviously. But, you know, it was really, your question was about like what started this and the numbing depression. And it was just being on this hamster wheel of chasing goal after goal after goal to finally be able to reflect and go backwards and be like, am I doing these things because it's feeding my soul and it's really what I want to do? Or am I writing books and am I being on the board of multiple nonprofits, living in this place that I don't want to live and all this type of stuff and trying to do the things that I think I'm supposed to do. And that was the thing. You know, I was just doing the things that were taught to do, right? Be successful in business, donate your time to nonprofits, which is all great stuff and everything. I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy it, but now my life is going in a different direction that really is about feeding my soul first, then looking at my life obligations, which includes work versus, you know, we talk about work-life balance, and that's something I was trying to achieve at the time. And if you try to achieve work-life balance, just by the very nature of this, the phrase work-life balance, you're trying to achieve work and make that the priority, then look at your life afterwards. Then from there, where's your connection to the greater mystery of this human experience, right?
Wow. So you mentioned about feeding your soul first before you do something else. What is that actually? Can you share that to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like for me, when I moved to the ocean, I got into surfing and things like that, and stand-up paddleboarding, whatever. And I would look at the seals in the water, and I would look at this, and sometimes the seals will just like look up, they'll poke up their head and just stare at the sky. And it really got me thinking when I first saw that. I was like, what does a seal think? You know, a creature that has never been on land, that lives entirely in the ocean, and when they're looking up in the sky, like what are they thinking about? And then you can apply that to land animals and so much more. But it's just these simple moments, right? When we talk about spirituality, it can seem like it's a little taboo to speak about that in a business or work type environment, but I'm not talking about like meditation and transcending the ego and going off to another place or all these type of stuff. Like that's great. That's a great tactic. That's a great tool in practice. But even meditation can be overwhelming, or something like journaling. And then when one gets into spirituality, they start to naturally, most people at least, check the boxes. We are in a masculine archetypal energy that the world operates in, that's very much about like doing, achieving, and all this type of stuff. So naturally, when you get into spirituality, it's like checking boxes like, oh, I meditated today. Oh, I did breath work. Oh, I journaled. Oh, I read, or I prayed, or all these things. Check, 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 check. And then it almost starts to feel overwhelming because you have so many things to do when it comes to your spiritual connection, which defeats the whole purpose. Spirituality is as simple as being in the moment and bringing presence to your thoughts and bringing awareness to your thought patterns, to the present moment. And that can look like so many different things to different people. And that's why I started with talking about the example with the seal, because that is just such a simple thing that most of us can relate to. Or maybe when you type of stuff, go outside and just stare at the sun. There's so much health benefits from sun gazing and things like that. So there's really an abundance of ways you can go about spirituality. And that's one thing I just want to invite people to not think of it as like another thing that they need to check off their to-do list.
Mm. But how that process leading you to writing the book, the fourth book, and becoming the best-selling books, though?
Well, I practiced what I preached for a couple of years,
Mm.
essentially. I did this deep dive of spirituality and explored these different things. And spirituality, in many ways, can feel like a lonely road if you're someone like me that was activated, that didn't have any friends into it, right? There's no spirituality for dummies per se. And in some ways, like my book kind of is an overview of different rabbit holes to go down, but at the same time, there's not like a roadmap of do this, then do that, or this is how it works. Like, there's just so many different things, but that's also the beauty of it, because it's to choose your own adventure. You
Mm.
can be like, oh, am I into the human origin story and aliens and things like that? Do I want to connect with guides? Oh, what's this thing about crystals? Do they have energy? What's that about? Maybe I want to learn about that. So there's all kinds of different esoteric ways you could go about it. Or maybe it's through somatic healing and like really breath work and things like that, and how trauma and old emotions and stories and things like that get stored in the body. So the fun thing about spirituality is that there are so many different rabbit holes, and I've gone down a lot of them. Also, I joined Aubrey Marcus's mastermind
Mm.
called Fit for Service for 2 years. And in my second year in the program, I became a lighthouse member, like almost like a mentor and ambassador to help out with the new members. So I got very entrenched in a spiritual community, which anytime you join any sort of mastermind, that's always like, the fast pass to really learning the material more. So that was really an accelerator for my soul development.
Sam, it's great that you had that aha moment in your life and then you changed into a total different path that bring you happiness, fulfillment, and satisfaction. And earlier today, Viv and I met a lady. She's a neuroscience expert who help organization, help leaders to overcome the loneliness syndrome of being in the leadership, right, in the leadership position. And now your work can also help people to heal and make improvement in their lives, being connecting spiritually so that they can be performing better, they can do the works in a more meaningful way. Can you teach us how that two word links together?
Yeah, there's so many different ways, and I always go back to the breath, because the breath is something that we're not taught about. Most of us aren't taught about the power of the breath, and I really learned this through a breathwork journey, which a breathwork journey is basically like 60 and 90 minutes of just breathing with a facilitator, no psychedelics, no anything outer substances, just you and your breath. And that in itself is a very transformative experience. I could get into what mine was like, but whatever. Without getting into that, there's simple breath practices that anyone that has ever taken a yoga class before has been a part of. So a lot of yoga classes will do something like alternate nostril breathing, which is basically plugging one nose, breathing through the other, then the other. It's a nice lightweight breath exercise. There's also box breathing, where you inhale for say 3 seconds, hold for 3 seconds, exhale for three, and then you repeat going more seconds on each one. There's another strategy called Awaken Daily from the people of Awaken Breathwork, where you go so you inhale and then you do exhale each for one count for about 10 counts, and then hold for 10 seconds, do 20 counts of that, hold for 20 seconds, and then do 30, and then hold for 30. And that only takes a few minutes. And by doing that one, it's almost like a 3 to 5 minute little breath work routine that you can do at your desk before in between meetings or anything like that, and have like a total system reset. So there's a lot of different things. I obviously am a big proponent of scheduling breaks throughout your day, and there's so many different routes. We could talk about routines and building mindfulness into your routines and all this sorts of stuff. But the number one thing that I think is a good takeaway for people is learning about breath work and trying these different breath work modalities. And whether it's before a meeting, or say you have a presentation and maybe you're nervous and you're stressed a little, that can help to calm you down. Maybe you're aggravated, because let's be real, so many times in business things come across and they're frustrating. And I mean, this is like 101 stuff, right? Like, before you send an email, sit on it, or maybe send it to yourself, because how many of us have sent an email when it didn't really come from our authentic self, and we're sending it, that's going to cause more disturbance in the energy field, whether it's with us, it's with them, and then that has a ripple effect, and no one wants to bring more of that in. So simple mindfulness practices, like obviously sending the email to yourself or waiting to send it, or maybe doing some breath work and then recentering. So, if there was one thing I had to say, it would definitely be breath.
Breath. And how, if that's one thing that business leaders now they are facing with is, to constantly challenging, right? And then for constant
Mm-hmm.
challenges like that, how can breath or mindfulness help them to build the resilience that they need to run their organization, to overcome challenges and to excel in the future, though?
Well, it brings you back to yourself, because we're disconnected from our bodies, many of us, and we're disconnected from the greater mystery of this life. And we get caught in the matrix. There's a chapter in my book, Soul Life Balance, that's called To Be in the Matrix, but Not of the Matrix. And it's all about, basically, we need to play this game. What happens with most people that really go down the spiritual path is we end up doing what's called spiritually bypassing. And it's almost like using spirituality as an excuse to be a certain way, to justify the way why we're being that way, right? So that's like one flip side. If you're really deep in spirituality, if you're not really into spirituality or mindfulness or anything like that, something like the breath or connecting with yourself, mindfulness, to answer your question, is going to reconnect you with your higher self and the greater mystery. And I'm not saying like by doing a simple breath work exercise, like something that's going to take 3 minutes, you're going to be like, oh my God, like I'm awake. Like, oh wow, what was I doing this whole time? I'm not saying that, but it can calm down the nervous system, where now you're coming from a place of love and understanding, if you continue to build in these practices, because it's so easy to get caught up in the game of the matrix and the pressures of society, and not realizing the impact we're making. So if it's a compounding effect, the more we can build in mindfulness practices.
Sam, conversation like this or articles that we can find about you on the internet can only show the tip of the iceberg about you and the life that you've been through. But we wanna unveil the one that beneath the surface. All right. And when we look at your portfolio, when we do the research about you, we feel like that there's a lot of things that you've been through that requires a deep level of thinking. All right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, and not everybody has that privilege to have the right kind of thinking. And Vivian and I has been in the quest to research about why people, how people think, why people think, and what makes our thinking different. So we would want to unveil that, that eyes under beneath the iceberg, to know how did you think when you face with, challenging time, when you face with difficult times in your life. What did you do to have you thinking it right and thinking it in depth, so that they can take you into the right path, though.
Yeah, this deep dive of this journey started for me in 2019. Now,
Mm,
I'm 34 years old and I've had a lot of life to live before 2019 where I didn't have these tools that I now have. And for the most part, our society and the Western culture doesn't teach us how to deal with anything around depression or really communicating with others. Like it's not something that is learned. So previously, before this deep dive, there was a quote that I still resonates with me, but it kind of became my anchor. I watched one of the newer Rocky movies, and it was probably in the mid 2000s or something like that. It was one of the newer ones. And the quote goes, "It's not about how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward." Which,
mm,
when I heard that quote in the movie, it just like stuck with me because it was so true. Like, there's things that happen that are going to knock you down in life, right? And it's so easy to fall into a limited state of belief and victim mentality because our conditioning and programming is to keep us limited and trying to keep us in a victim mentality, which means, why did this happen to me rather than why did this happen for me?
mm,
There's a massive reframe there because so many times when something happens, we're like, oh, why did this happen to me? Poor me, and have a pity party. Whereas when you start to go down the spiritual path, it's, oh, this is part of my growth. This thing that I think is bad is actually a blessing in disguise. Even though it, like, however bad it seems, I'm not saying like a death of a loved one or you lose a leg, whatever it might be. Like, I'm obviously these are terrible things that we would not want to invite into our being.
mm,
But if we just get caught in a cycle of negativity, then we're going to be in a feedback loop of just negative stuff. And quantum physics, so now I'm getting into stuff that I've learned through spirituality in recent years, but quantum physics proves that our outer world that we experience with our senses is a direct reflection of our inner world. And
okay.
I've been working with plant and earth medicine so much, which really is a fast track to all of this, to experience firsthand that when I start to get in a negative feedback loop about anything, right? Now all of a sudden, maybe it's interactions with people, clients, vendors, anything it might be, it's all that same type of energy.
Mm,
So I don't like that. No one wants to be in a state of whether it be stress, anxiety, fear, depression, anything like that we would label negative. No
mm,
one wants that. So how do we overcome that? If quantum physics proves that the outer world we experience is a direct reflection of the inner world, easy. We go inside. And everything that we've always been taught about how the human experience works is about someday. It's about working towards something and trying to get somewhere. But the truth is, we only have one real moment, and that is this everlasting now moment right now. The
mm,
past, sure, it exists in a different timeline. The future exists, but we can't really control the future, but we can control what happens right now. So if we're able to bring awareness to how our inner landscape actually feels through things like reflection,
mm,
which could be something that Adyashanti talks about, which is porch gazing, a lost art of just sitting there and gazing out and just kind of falling into a reflection state. Not even meditation. Obviously, meditation is a great way to bring you back to awareness. We've talked about a few other things, whether it be connecting with the animal kingdom or journaling, even reading, any of these things that can slow down the human experience and bring you to the present moment so that you can bring awareness to
mm,
your thought patterns. I teach yoga, and one of the things I talk about in my yoga classes is when we go through this moving meditation, we're able to slow down, we're able to witness our thought patterns, our beliefs, and behaviors. And it's in that very moment we are able to rewire the neuro pathways in our brain. Now, 80% Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about how over 80% of our thoughts are the same as the day before. So
Mm.
if yesterday was a day of negativity, all these labeled quote unquote bad things, then most likely today that's going to come up for us too. If we don't take control of the reins and bring awareness to this, we're going to be caught in that loop. So how do we rewire the neural pathways to have a more meaningful, fulfilling, and joyful and loving human experience? We do these practices so that we can catch those thought patterns and in the moment invite in loving kindness and reprogram the mind to serve us best.
Everybody knows that building the strength from within will always give us the strength that nobody can take away from us, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then doing it is extremely hard. I really like to be present with my now, with my present moment, but things that keep hitting on me in terms of work life and things like that. And then from time to time, Vivian and I and the people around forgot to maintain our coolness, our kindness, our in that moment. So if you're an expert on that, and you write a book about the best-selling book about that to make the soul and the life balancing, can you teach us how can we at any moment in our life be calm and control our moment so that we're not going to be regret of the works that or anything that we might be doing, saying that hurt to other people?
Yeah, for me, it does all come back to the breath. And I know I mentioned some breath exercises earlier, and a lot of people can find meditation or breath, like connecting with your breath, those lightweight breath work exercises, kind of boring or whatever. A lot of people find yoga boring, and this is resistance. This is the ego coming in, not wanting to do the work. And if we don't actually do the work, then you're not going to see the results. I mean, it goes back to, I believe it's Albert Einstein that said this, but doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the definition of craziness, right?
Yep.
So, like, if we just apply this and are like, oh, this all sounds good in theory, but we're not actually applying it, then nothing's going to happen. Now, for me, I absolutely loved yoga. Yoga became my sanctuary, and I don't love meditating. I'll be the first to say I'm not, meditation is not part of my daily practice. I
Mm.
meditate from time to time, and I do have different forms of meditation, but the traditional, like sit down at your altar for 20 minutes or whatever it might be, maybe an hour, that's not me.
Mm.
I do it from time to time. My form of meditation is the moving meditation that is yoga. And when I was able to connect with my breath through yoga and connect with my thought patterns and beliefs and all this type of stuff through connecting with my breath and the movement and everything that yoga brings, then I was able to bring this outside of the yoga studio, off of my yoga mat, into daily conversations where I'm able to slow down and really be more present in the moment. That's what's worked with me. In the book, I talk about a number of different ways, because really the truth is, it's not one size fits all. You're going to have to try different things and see how it works for you. And the other part of this is, I'm not perfect, and I don't believe that anyone is perfect. We're still going to have our times when we get all worked up, flustered, or whatever. I was talking with a friend last night about mindfulness and these type of things, and I go, hey, she's staying with me for a little bit here, and I was like, you could probably notice how, like, the past couple of days I've had a lot of things on my calendar and a lot of prior or obligations, and I've been a little like hustling and not fully present, right? And I go, did you notice that? And I go, I've noticed that. It's about bringing that awareness. It's not that I haven't noticed it. It's like, oh, okay, I'm kind of veering from the path. Let me bring it back now, and this is kind of the game that we start to play. It's just like meditation. Meditation, they teach to witness your thoughts and not to get lost in the thoughts. Just witness it and then kind of note it. Just pop it. Be like, oh, that's thought. Okay. Now, if we start to build that into our pattern of just actually being, then that's how we actually are able to drop into the present moment. And it's all through repetition.
Sam, I want to ask you a moment of truth also. Um, the life before the life before the spirituality life that you are having at the moment, in the successful path that you had, okay, actually you still having but different kind of life. I want to have a comparison between the two life, what back then and what now. Can you describe first, and I'll tell you the reason for this why. I have a lot of friends who are also to us are chasing the wrong kind of lights. Okay, I think I also the one who chased the wrong kind of light. So it's good to compare what we had in the past and what we are having now, so that we can have something precious to us heading toward the future. All right.
Hmm.
So I would want you to share with our audience, what was the life that you had back there, and what was the life that you're having right now, how satisfied you are now.
Yeah, and that's a great question. This brings up the archetypal energies of the masculine and feminine. And I kind of briefly touched on this earlier, but
Mm,
this isn't about like genitals or the sex you are or whatever. You could think of the masculine as like yang energy and as like life obligations and structure and things like that. Whereas the feminine archetypal energy is flow, intuition, like yin, and it's really connecting with your soul. Now, that is what the whole book is about, the feminine and masculine, right?
mm,
Because in soul life balance, soul represents the feminine, life represents the masculine, and it's a dance between the two. I was very much in my masculine before of doing, achieve, structure, blinders on, severed from my soul and my spiritual connection. And I did hear these whispers of things I would do, like the way I organized my calendar and hustling and grinding and building my business and networking. And I knew at the time, like, I didn't enjoy it, but it was part
mm,
of what I needed to do to build my business. And I got into
mm,
triathlons for a little bit there too, and I was not a runner, swimmer, or cyclist, not having a background in any of those three areas. And I used to wake up at 6 a.m. in January to swim in an outdoor pool in January. And I mean, I live in California, but it's still cold, right?
very.
So yeah, exactly. And it's like dark out in January. Like by the time I wake up, it's probably 5:30. You get there at 6. This is like maybe 5, 7 years ago. But I used to tell myself as a mantra before I knew what a mantra was back then. It was just like I wasn't even into affirmations. I don't know what I would call. I don't remember what I would call them back then. But as I swam the laps, it was successful people do the things that unsuccessful people don't like to do. And I would literally say that over and over again as I was swimming. And it was great. It got me through it. But I was in the out of balance masculine. It was
Mm,
very much just drive, do like, oh, I'm going to power through this. And a big part of my spiritual awakening also has to do with the aftermath of all of that energy, which is burnout,
mm,
and now having gotten into spirituality, I've found myself at times getting very much in my feminine, which means like intuition, flowy, not really having the structure and obligations on the calendar and all that type of stuff, and really like being more present with the moment. And I've been able to, it's been easier for me than maybe some others because I have such a great foundation of being in my masculine and structure and obligation. One of my books was called The Written Goal,
mm,
and it was all about like goal setting. So I'm very good at that. So learning to be in the feminine, yes, I veered over to the feminine side and I know what that's like, but I didn't really get stuck there.
mm,
Now I have a pretty good balance between going back to the masculine and feminine. Having said all that, the past 3 years, especially with the pandemic and whatnot, I've really looked at that as an opportunity to go within and be in the feminine and whatnot. And now that I'm re-emerging and really getting back into business and work and all that, I find myself from time to time going back to my old ways of just
mm,
like hustling and grinding and powering through it. And that's where awareness comes in, right?
mm.
Because I have this practice of bringing myself back to myself, I'm able to catch myself when I'm getting out of balance in my masculine and bring in more of the soul into the equation.
Mm. Sam, I'm a big fan of of the philosophy of trade-off. So if everything that you do, there's something else that you have to trade off to have time, have energies, and have space for doing that. So with the new path that you have joined in the past couple of years, was there anything that you put on the table to trade off? It's worth
Yeah,
sharing.
that's a great question, huh? And I wouldn't say that I really ever consciously thought about this, but what comes up is money, is our finances. You know,
Hmm.
my business called Swagworks, the business I've had since 2010. I incorporated in March of 2011, started planning for it in fall of 2010. So it's been about 11 years or so. That's been my cash cow. That's been my main business. And through the spiritual awakening, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done with this. I want to do something else. And I've been slowly trying to get out of it. I've started a couple two new businesses. Now I'm getting into keynote speaking, so kind of third business, if you will.
Hmm.
And during the pandemic, my swag company, Swagworks, was hit, and it's ever since 2020 we've been down 80%. Now, I have a lot of colleagues and friends in the industry that have bounced back, even their sales have increased. So there's no excuses. If I was my old self, I would be still uh, capable and everything else of bringing it back up. But I've looked at this as no, this is an opportunity to get out of this business. And having said that, it took that business several years to get going. You know,
Hmm.
the first 3 years, after 3 years, I saw some traction. 5 years, I was starting to really get some upward trajectory, and it was probably around, yeah, actually, yeah, no, 5 years is when it really took off for sure. So, anyways, all that to say, my coaching business, I've been doing that for about 2 years, and my marketing agency is a little over a year old, and keynote speaking I'm literally just getting into. So all my new businesses, I'm very much in that infancy stage, and they haven't taken off. So financially, that has been the trade-off. It has
Hmm.
been because I'm still living the lifestyle that I lived when, I had $1 million company with no employees, but now that's an 80% hit. So I haven't really thought about it, but yeah, that has been the struggle. And what it comes back to is presence. If I look at my finances, and I look 6 months from now or a year from now, even just 3 to 6 months from now, I'm like, this is not sustainable. So I have a little bit of the masculine coming in, being like, okay, I need to figure something out. I want to figure something out because this isn't sustainable. But at the same time, I'm bringing back in the feminine, the soul connection, where it's like, I've always been okay. In this moment, I'm okay. When I get caught thinking about the future, that's bringing up more stress and anxiety. If
Hmm.
my internal world is that, then that's not going to serve me to build this new path that I'm working on. So that's a really practical way to apply what we've talked about in terms of the trade off I've had.
So thanks for sharing. I think that we all come into this world from nothing. We all live in this world also empty, from nothing also, right? So eventually in our life, regardless of who we are, in our life cycle, there will be moment in life that we think about how we build the deep connections as human beings, for as an individual who we are, and how can we change in praise, change behavior, be really be who we are. And then you demonstrate that very beautifully. And earlier today we heard a conversation and a quote from our conversation is things that happen could be a reason, could be a season, or could be a lesson. So it could be anything. Then you are ready to embrace all the changes because of the resilience you've been built through your life. So I really admire the works that you do. I do have one last question because this is what I promised from my speaking coach, conversation coach, and then she asked me for every person that I met, I need to ask a bizarre question. All right. And Sam, when you were young, what did you dream? The older Sam gonna become.
Yeah, I wanted to be an NBA player, a professional basketball player. And I remember trading cards with like my fifth grade teacher, I think it was fifth grade, and like trading basketball cards, like, I don't know, at after class, recess, lunch, something, I don't remember. And him asking me that question, me saying that, and him going, oh, you know, the likelihood of that is not very good. And that's probably not going to happen, right?
Mhm.
Something to that degree. And I was like, I totally thought it was going to happen. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then ever since then, that crushed my dreams. And then that turned into like wanting to be a broadcaster for the NBA. And then I forgot about that. So it's kind of interesting now getting into like keynote speaking and having had 5 podcasts over the years. And I did want to get into broadcasting. But yeah, for the longest time, I didn't know. And I didn't really, I would not have describe myself as someone ambitious, you know, for the longest time. And then I went to college and really was like, okay, I need to reinvent myself. And I'm not happy with the person I am. And because I was a very different person in high school and younger. And that's when I reinvented myself. And I know this is the last question, so I won't go into it. And it's in my book, Soul Life Balance. But I talk about how when I got a DUI at age 22, that was the chip on my shoulder. That was like, no, I'm not a mess up. I'm not a screw up. I'm going to make something of my life. And that's been like the biggest chip on my shoulder to prove that I'm proved to myself in a lot of ways. So you can go deeper in the book and see like the driving forces that have molded me into being very thirsty for success, if you will.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you so much for sharing the personal stories today. And I think the transformation process that you had is really amazing. I think that uh, a lot of us want to do something that meaningful for us, for the people around us, and then by reading the book that's a self-life balance, I think that there will be a lot of things in there that we can practically apply to our daily operations, but then also can apply to in the long runs to get us into where we want to be freely being ourselves. So thank you so much for joining to our show today and for sharing your story with us. I'll definitely we share the posts and the books that you write to our community in here. And if one day if you have a plan to translate into Vietnamese, connect with us in here also, so we can get that onto many more readers in this region. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ha, and thank you, Vivian. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your guys' show, and so great to connect with you both.
Thank you very much. You have a wonderful day there. All right.
You too.
Bye bye.